It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. All right, buckle up, buttercups, because this week the pressure is building to some rather explosive crescendo moments at the end of the week. I've got you covered. Don't worry about it. So how about you grab your matcha, your tea, your cocoa, your coffee, bottled water, whatever you got, your milky. You got this. Let's do it together, whether we're going to work together, where we're cleaning up a mess together, where we're taking hot girl or hot guy walk, going to the dog park, cleaning the Airbnb, or learning our ABCs. Whatever we're doing together, we got this week. All right. So I'm going to amuse you this week. I started this week with humor. The moon is in Sagittarius. It tickled my funny bone. It tickled my Mars. And one of my many forms of aggressive behavior is humor. It's humor because I don't like to get mad. I have a bad temper. You guys all think I'm patient, but you'll find out in this episode what's happening when my eyes are shining and I'm grinning and I'm talking to people like they are 3 or 4 when they're not. We're going to talk about conspiracy theories. We're going to talk about people thinking the moon got stolen or disappeared. I had somebody literally, like just before I was recording the intro, after finishing the whole podcast, because I have learned to do this part last, because I'll forget what I said in the intro. By the end of it, I'm like, did I say what I was going to say? So I just say what I'm going to say and then I talk about it. But anyway, I was waiting for some files to finish processing, and I was checking TikTok, and somebody was literally arguing for their ignorance and saying, it isn't a conspiracy theory. It was our observation because no one could see the moon from September 27th through October 5th. And I'm like, well, first of all, the new moon, which lasts for 3 days, is the dark of the moon. And other than that, it was visible. You were just probably not looking at the right time of day. That somebody will argue for that. So that actually gave me the perfect segue to tell you about the first segment that you're going to listen to next, where I talk about it's okay for spirituality to be intelligent. We can have smart spirituality, and why there are consequences to it not being smart. It may be a privileged take. I'm willing to take the risk. I laugh a lot in this episode. Oh God, my blood pressure. If I don't laugh, it's going to like spike. So yeah. I love it when people want to dig down. So that's that cognitive dissonance you'll be hearing about, is when people like dig in their heels. They're so afraid to be wrong. They feel like it's a fatal flaw. Just own you didn't know what you're talking about and be okay. If you misspeak, you misspeak. I have a Gemini Venus. I can be as bad as Tim Walz. I'll rattle something off and misspeak, use the wrong word, put the wrong day, whatever. Just own that shit. Instead of, no, I had to be right. Meh. All right. So there's that. We're talking about that. And we're talking a little bit about protection and protective energy, because Pluto is stationing direct this week. I will go through what I think is in the headlines. I'm not going through it all because it's in the magazine and it's in the Patreon. I read a little bit from the magazine. I read from the article on protection. Not the whole thing though, just the first page. And then I talk about the 3 Ps, which is, you'll find out if you listen to the podcast. We got 2 Patreon or patron shoutouts because we grew a lot again. So thank you. If you're a new patron, thank you so much for joining us. Without you, there is no podcast. And remember that if you listen on Spotify, you can leave a comment for the podcast and you can thank a patron, because again, patrons are the reason we have this podcast. We are 100% listener supported. All right, I'm just gonna get to it. You gotta hear about smart spirituality, and then people thinking that the moon got stolen. I can't with this. I can't, guys. This is why I went public. I was happy in private. I'm not going to lie. I was happy as a private astrologer where people needed to know the secret not to get a reading with me. By the way, if you can't find a booking with me on my calendar, there's no more bookings. Okay. The bookings will open back up. I think I'll open them for January in November, but I haven't made up my mind. So I'm still looking at how I want to run my schedule. But the coaching program starts October 16th. Okay, October 16th, and you can take a look at that. This is where I'm going to help you basically get the advantage of having a reading with a consulting astrologer like myself, where all you need is your birth chart, and I will help you identify what we're talking about, like finding your Venus placement. And then I'll be giving prescriptive activities for you to practice to heal your money win. Okay, to find your sense of security, find your value, understand how worthy you are. That's all going to be happening starting October 16th. If you're a patron, hold on, I'll get you the discount. Okay, so hold on. If you're not a patron, you can go ahead and register. Discounts only go out to patrons. All right, so shall we talk about smart spirituality for a little bit and why we want our spirituality to be smart and why people think being smart is a problem when we look at religion? And since we're on the Spotify top 50 religion and spirituality chart, and yeah, we're going to wade into some dangerous territory. Maybe I'll be accused of playing with demons again. Yeah, I don't, but it sure is funny. They think so. Alrighty, let's get on with the show. Hey, I told you it was going to be a month, didn't I? Yeah. I don't lie to you guys. So, things are starting to get serious, and that's when Laurie starts to chuckle because we're in danger. Oh God. So, let's talk about spirituality before we get into all the seriousness of what's coming up this week, because we end the week with a bang. So let's talk about spirituality for a minute. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. I've talked about it on my TikTok lives. I've talked about it in my Patreon. I've talked about it in the magazine. You can be spiritual and smart at the same time. We can have beautiful belief systems and not be completely delusional. Okay. And I'm saying this just because there are so many freaking conspiracy theories running around. So many that are so fantastical and so undeniably stupid that it makes me want to bang my head against a wall. I'm not going to, because I need my precious brains to work so I can serve all of you. But for real, come on. Okay. I know, especially in America, because I know those of you listening from overseas are like, what is wrong with your people? You are not okay. I know. We can be utterly, not that there aren't people with some really bizarre ideas in other countries, because there are. We're not the only people with dumb people, but we just have, it's voluminous. Let's put it that way. In America, we have so vilified being intelligent that people have been so fooled into not knowing what intelligence is that they believe Elon Musk is a genius. He's not a genius. He's cunning. He might have above average intelligence, but he's a little privileged turd. I'm watching my language because I know the children are listening. Because there are many worse bad names I would call him if children were not listening. But I don't want to sully their ears. But he's not. He's privileged. He had money and he convinced people he was a genius, and here he is. Okay. We have vilified intelligence to the point where people will act dumb and not exercise their brains because they think that is more spiritual. You can be spiritual and smart. I will tell you, I had many, many strange metaphysical experiences most of my life, and I fought them tooth and toenail. Tooth and toenail. Because I was a rational, logical person, and the visions or being clairvoyant or clairaudient, etc. And no, not mentally ill. I have the paperwork to prove it. Although I was the one suggesting I get tested because I'm like, this is crazy shit happening. And that's from a young age. I fought it. But the one thing that really changed me forever was a quantum mechanics theory class I was forced to take in college. And I say forced because the professor wouldn't let me out of it. And I've talked about it on the podcast before, so I'm not going to go into the whole long story this time. Maybe another episode. But realizing that everything was connected at the subparticle level. Okay. And I learned about it so long ago, like string theory wasn't even a thing. People didn't talk about quantum mechanics. Stephen Hawking was only known mostly in academic circles. He hadn't become a household name. That was a few years after I started studying. And that's what blew my mind and made me dive deeper into metaphysics. That's what made things make sense instead of just believe this. Because I didn't like blind belief. I had seen the damage it had done to people in a variety of ways, whether it was political or religious zealotry, whether it was people joining cults. I grew up in the Portland area, and what we called the Rajneeshis, that community with the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. Although I was very impressed that they took over a town. Now, you can look it up. It was a whole thing. But my Pluto in the 10th house as a small child, I was like, ooh, I could own a town. I had decisions to make. No, I do not want to run a cult. It's tempting sometimes. It's tempting because I watch people like flock to these weird things, and I'm like, if I started a cult, I could make it ethical. I fight the urge every day. And yes, I'm jesting, but we can be smart and we can be spiritual, folks. It is not a flex to think you have secret information about some conspiracy about, my favorites are like the Galactic War, the lizard people. These are all white supremacist tropes. They've been around for a long time. It's not new. And what it does is it devoids us of responsibility for like taking care of the planet, recognizing we are not separate. It is still an extension of dominionism, which is being deconstructed right now with Pluto in its last degree of Capricorn. Dominionism says, like human beings, or let's say an ET or whatever they call them now, because they call them other stuff now. I don't even want to stay up with it. People want to believe that we're in charge of this planet instead of understanding we are an integral part of it. But that we are one of many moving parts that makes this planet the way it is. But we're not in charge of it. That's ego. Okay. And not one of us can rescue ourselves independently. We have to work together. And we're going to be forced to in the next couple of years. Like, we are going to have to work together to adapt to the climate reality that we face. It's You can be spiritual and understand that science is real. That even if, let's say you believe in deities or a deity or a god or goddess, why wouldn't, if you believe in that, in an omnipotent presence, why wouldn't you believe it could guide the scientist's hand, or the doctor's hand? It floors me. We can be smart and spiritual at the same time. The whole sheep from the goats thing was because, sheep are kind of dumb and goats are smart or ornery. I've met smart sheep and dumb goats, so it's a generalization. I hate to be speciesist. But that's why that trope kept going in the 20th century in evangelical circles. And yet they'll call you sheep. Isn't that funny? That they'll politically call you sheep. But they're supposed to be following the shepherd. I know. I'm like, get your metaphors straight. Anyway, it's not cool to be dumb. And I'm not saying dumb is when you have learning challenges. That's not dumb. That just means you learn differently. When I say dumb, I mean unthinking. That just blindly listening to things and falling for shit without questioning it. Because I've known a lot of people with learning challenges because I've always helped people learn. And I will find any way to describe something, help someone learn. Because I have my own learning challenges. I'm really good at a few things, and then there's some things I'm like, I suck at it. Right? And so I have infinite patience for people who have a challenge. But I do not have patience for intentional ignorance or willful ignorance or willful cognitive bias and weaponizing incompetence. I have zero patience for that. It's not spiritual. You're not in the special know. You're not spiritually better. Believing that people are going to be separated between those who get it and those who don't. That people could be left behind. Packaging rapture theology in a new age bow. I'm not cool with that. That's stupid. Okay. And it's not spiritual. We can be smart and spiritual. All right, kids? All right. Don't go around calling people dumb, though, because it gets you in trouble. Notice I didn't say it was wrong. I should have said because it's wrong. I'm such a bad influence. Oh, my God. But you know why I'm a bad influence? Because I had... Oh my God. In one of my older videos where I was giving people like, hey, here's what you can do. Be involved in your local politics. Be involved, Somebody was like, you're just calling on demons to make Kamala president. And I was like, nothing in that video would have led to that. And so that's the people who believe we work with demons to do astrology instead of rubbing our brain cells together and using analytical skills. But okay, because being smart makes you aligned with Satan. Okay. And I had a conversation with my dad, and my dad and I have different beliefs. Okay. And it's endearing to me now at 55, and he's almost 80. And I can just like water off a duck's back with it. Okay. When I was younger, these were raging arguments. Okay. When I was in like my late 20s into my 30s, it would be like stroke inducing arguments. I literally blew blood vessels in my eyes with rage when I was younger. Now it's funny, but I brought this up to my dad. I was like, well, they think I'm working with demons. And my dad's like, well, demons are smarter than humans. And I'm like, no, Dad. Well, humans have been tricked by them. And I'm like, okay, let's say they exist because every thought that's ever been thought exists. Okay, so if enough people have thought about something, then they have shaped that thing into some form of reality. Okay, we'll go with that premise. then they willingly got tricked. So they didn't have to take responsibility for their own actions. Thus the free will and fate argument right there. But anyway, so I teased the troll. I teased them. Because no, I do not deal with demons. People might wish. If you do, have at it, man. It's not my judgment. I just use my brain because spiritually, I believe if you have any form of gift, and I see the privilege of having a high intelligence because mine is up there. I use that tool to help people. But Jesus. It is okay to be smart and spiritual. And we can be smart in lots of different ways, by the way. And I wrote about that in the Awake Space magazine for October, because we went in you remember we've got a little segment called Astrology School, and so we did aspects for a couple of months. Now we're on to planets through the houses. And it was Mercury's turn. So I talked about all the different ways you could be intelligent. There's so many ways to be intelligent. Some people are emotionally intelligent. Some people are socially intelligent. Some people are physically intelligent. Some people are super intelligent with nature. Some people are spiritually intelligent. Some people are, math intelligent. Some people are verbal intelligent. Some people are business intelligent. There's so many. Look up Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. It's a fascinating theory. There's so many, and you could be mechanically intelligent or technologically intelligent. There are so many different ways to be smart. So never think when I'm like, don't be dumb, that I'm saying you're not smart in your own way. But there is no reason to be hell-bent on communal destruction because it's not cool to be smart. Okay. Oh, that is frustrating. And again, I'm not talking about having learning challenges. I'm not talking about having dyslexia, dysgraphia. I have dyscalculia, which don't you think that's funny? Isn't that ironic that an astrologer would have dyscalculia? But don't make me write out those calculations that I do in my head somewhat intuitively. But if I can't write it out. You don't want me writing out math. I will not pass that test. Okay. There are many ways to be intelligent. What I'm saying is don't be intentionally ignorant. And I can't imagine anybody in my audience is. I'm just trying to give you some talking points when you're dealing with people out in the world, because for real, there are some real special people out there right now. It's driving me nuts. And ignorance is dangerous, and ignorance is different than stupidity. Stupidity is the inability to actually learn anything. Ignorance is not knowing. Okay. Willful ignorance is the choice, but being ignorant just means you don't know until you're educated, and everybody's ignorant of things they haven't learned yet. It's not bad to be ignorant, but it's really stupid to be willfully ignorant, because you're hell bent on not knowing better. And that's dangerous. I think that is one of that it's so dangerous. I'm okay with people who are actively trying and wondering and questioning, and maybe they don't get it right away. Maybe they're like, I don't understand this. And it's okay, we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying. If you've ever taken a class with me, you know that. I'll be like, okay, so was that clear? It wasn't? Okay, let's try it again. Let me try this way. Do you need it to be more visual? Do I need to work with it? If we were physically present with one another and not on a Zoom, I would do physical activities if that's what it took. Because I believe everybody needs the opportunity to learn, but Believing somebody took the moon is dumb. Believing that the government controls the weather is dumb. It's dumb. There's scientific evidence to the contrary. And if they could control it, then they can stop it. And why would they do that? Like, why would people do that? You know, they do lots of nefarious things, but if you're making natural disasters, it's actually not helping the government. Okay. And I know Marjorie Taylor Greene said it was because of the elections coming up. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but not surprised it came out of her mouth. Speaking of willful ignorance, God, I wish I had a birth time for her, because she just, she makes me want to be mean. She gets my Scorpio rising going, where I just want to sting her. But it logically, let's say, even if they did control the weather, this would not be good timing, for the very reason that people would accuse them of doing it. So it's a very stressful situation, beyond the tragedy that looms ahead. So there's that. So it is okay to be smart and spiritual. And being smart and spiritual can mean you are religious too. It's not dumb to be religious if you understand why you believe what you believe. My very, very favorite uncle in the whole wide world, and I had quite a few uncles, but my very, very favorite uncle, Uncle Lawrence, was a man of faith, and he was a pastor, and he was a more conservative person than I, who was one of the most principled, ethical people I knew. He walked the walk, he talked the talk, and he showed up. And he lived his life by example. Like, he was the example. Was he a perfect human being? No. But he took accountability. He didn't ever it has to be let off the hook. He didn't go around begging people's forgiveness. He would show up and say, you know what? I made a mistake. I was thinking wrong. And again, far more conservative than I. And yet when his grandchild came out as gay, and it was a real crisis, because again, far more conservative than I'm not going to lie, those of us who were more left-leaning in the family did pop some popcorn. I'm like, how's this going to go? But I knew my uncle would have a shift of perspective, and he shouldn't have had to, because it was a grandchild, right? But often people require personal experience to change their viewpoint. I knew he'd come around, and I knew he'd get past love the sinner, hate the sin, all that bullshit. And it turned things around. And that's one example. There were many, many examples where he would shift his belief, not turn his back, but lean deeper into what he knew was true, which was love. Love is the most powerful energy. Whether it is you believe it's coming from God, whether you believe it's coming from the universe, whether you read Harry Potter and learned it early on, that love is the most powerful magic, because it is. That is a universal truth. And I knew his belief was in that, and it reshaped his thinking over time. He was a good man. He's on my mind. Maybe he's around or something. I don't know. Maybe he's like, Laurie, you're preaching. You're preaching. Even though he told me I couldn't be a preacher when I was 9 and I wanted to be just like him. He was a smart man. And he believed some of those really conservative things because his childhood had been absolutely hellaciously chaotic. Because my grandfather was a violent alcoholic. And my grandmother wasn't too far off behind because she was embittered. and trapped and ill and angry and full of rage. And she died when my uncle was 14 and my mom was 8. I was very shocked when I found out he'd been a hooligan as a teenager. He took a 20-pound bag of flour and put it all over somebody's house on the inside when he was mad at them. Yeah. I found that out, and he was getting into fights. So my great-grandma moved the family like across the river. But I digress. I was just so shocked because I couldn't imagine my uncle doing that. But I understood why he became so conservative, why he didn't believe in drinking, why he was like socially very conservative, because he'd lived in chaos. And people will turn to conservatism when they've been in chaos. It's fear-based. I don't want this thing that scares me. And that's why people believe in conspiracy theories. It's fear-based. And that's why whenever you ask me, should I be afraid? I say, no, you shouldn't. Fear is the mind killer. And it is okay to be spiritual and smart. As much as I did not like being, somebody with a lot of clairs and having metaphysical experiences happening, I always had a faith. I was raised in church, and I was lucky in the church I went to, which was different than my uncle's, where love was the primary message. It was a great foundation. And I didn't leave the church for any other reason than they weren't meeting the mission of being of service to people, of living the good news. That's why I left the church. I said, you know what? I'll just go do it. I'll just go live it. I don't want this theology. And then I explored other belief systems, other religions, and just tried to understand humanity from a different space and always be of service. And now I do it as an astrologer, a philosopher, an anthropologist, a political analyst. I'm here to help humans. Some of it's selfish because I'd like to live on a nice planet. And some of it just comes from knowing that's my purpose, is to be a space to hold energy for you to find your truth and your beliefs. I know so many of you have religious trauma, and I know some of these conspiracy theories have got to be just sending you out through the roof. But arguing with people isn't going to get them to change their mind. If you want to understand more about cognitive bias and you are a patron, I want you to go check out the past issues of the Awake Space Astrology magazine. If you're a magazine subscriber, those are available for download in the Patreon shop as part of your membership. I wrote about cognitive dissonance, I think back in May, and how to recognize it, because we all have it, regardless, whether you're religious, whether you're an atheist, we all have it. And so identifying it. In this month, in the magazine, I wrote about your power and reclaiming it. Even if you never had it to start with, but it's there. It's nascent in you. And people who own their power don't fall for frickin' conspiracy theories. Being in your power is smart spirituality. Okay. It's empowered spirituality. Anybody who says they have all the answers is a liar. There's only one true this. That would be a false answer. We can't know. We can only know our own truth. And our own truth might be different than somebody else's. And their truth is still their truth. We don't need to fight about our truths. That's how wars start. And that's how wars expand. And that's how we're seeing it. And we're seeing these beliefs used to do egregious things in the world. So be smart in it. we need to do a little patron shout out before we get to the next segment. Speaking of conspiracy theories, you're going to get to hear me go off on some of them. And then we got to do a couple segments because we've grown a lot again. What the heck? Thank you for joining. I've got a segment it'll come up after the patron shout out on conspiracy theories. Oh my God. I kind of go off on that one. And then I'm going to talk about Pluto going direct, because that's some big bada boom energy. And I'll go through the headlines as well. So that's what's up on deck, guys. Alrighty, let's do a round of patron shoutouts. All right, you heard the music. It's time for some patron shoutouts. Wowza, 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 wowza. This is exciting. We've had a bunch of new people join. So as with every single episode, because we are 100% listener supported, we're going to thank our patrons. And you, if you're listening on Spotify, can thank a patron too. All right. And if you don't want to listen to all this, you can use the fast forward button. All right. We've got Jessica, Zoe, Gina, Pleasure, Kay, Shannon, Holly, Amanda, Leah, Andrea, your favorite teacher, Allie, Chantel, Sherry, Jen, Grant with a Mercury symbol, Chelsea, Caleb, Camry, Chris, Jen, Ann, Cecile, Leah, Mariah, Lisa, GS, Queef Queen, Diana, Kay, Melissa, Dre, Jess, Chappie, Jean Bean, 66, Stephanie, Laurie, Brandy, Kendall, Care, Haley, Alita, Ariel, Jordan, Mick, or Mike, Cassie, Vicky, Bree, Teresa, Ann, Jeremiah, Becky, Starla, Wade, Keith Ferrand, Anika, Isis, Lauren, Lee, Cindy, Janae, Hannah, Christina, Mona, Vanessa, Katie, Catherine, Heather, I can speak, Shelly, Megan, Lucy, Megan, Ash, Iris, Abby, J9, Jillian, Amy, Tracy, Jeanette, Rachel, Bree, Andrea, Patricia, Jenna, Anna, Kayla, Magda, Fran, Alicia, Holly, Nicaea, Stephanie, Heather Weather, Denise, Bill, BB, Jen, Tammy, Lisa, Karen, Mackenzie, Mel, the boy, the mom, and the dog, Michelle, Midas, Belinda, Kim, Jacqueline, Luca, Mandy, Sandra, Barbara, Christina, Melanie, Kate, Darling May, Cindy, Coco, T-Bug B, City, Aaron, Jenny, Emerson, Andrea, Ellen, Sonia, Wanda, Dana, Elise, Sweet 75 CA, T. Delaney, T. Reed, Brian, Dr. Regini, Becky, Madison, I'm going to try to say this correctly, and if I don't pronounce your name correctly, please correct me in a private message. And I'm going to say Zifa, Lindsay, Beatrice, Charlie, Julie, Emerald Light, H, Jackie, Elizabeth, Sean, Heather, Mandy, Shale, Kimberly, Audrey, Denise, Liz, Shani, and Matt, Eat Soccer, Smokey, Darcy, Brandy. All right. That's the first of our patron shout outs. And we will get to the second one after we talk about the moon being stolen. You know, it's bad when both my daughter and my mother get a hold of me and say, let it go. Let it go, Laurie. Because they knew, watching my TikTok, I was not being patient. When I'm grinning and using sarcasm and speaking slowly as if someone were a child, that is when I am DONE, put a fork in me. That is when I am absolutely past my limit. And I know, that's part of that, like, social skills. Like, people wouldn't realize I was angry because I'd be grinning. Because I'm like, it's at the point of, are you that dumb? I know we're not supposed to say that. And kids, I know we're not supposed to call people dumb. But for heaven's sake, who would think that the government took the moon? Who? Because they didn't see it in a week. Oh my God. One, we had a new moon. And when the moon is new, the sun and the moon are right next to each other. Therefore, the moon is not shedding light. Because the moon doesn't have any of its own light. It reflects the light of the sun. Okay. I knew this when I was like 4. For over 50 years, I've known this. I did not need to be an astrologer. I do not understand. I mean, who would believe that someone would take the... Do you realize it would impact our gravity? Like, come on. You don't have to be an astrologer. You don't. I know I'm whining. I'm sorry. But how can you be that dumb? It upsets me. I understand not understanding astrology. Astrology is a field of study. I know how hard it was when I was beginning to learn it, because you have to learn to think in different ways. It can be very brain melty. So, like, I have infinite patience for teaching astrology. I can answer the same questions over and over. I asked many of those same questions 30 some years ago as a young person learning actual real astrology. But the moon rising and setting at different times throughout the year, the moon going through phases, is not mystical. It's not metaphysical. It's physics. And it's something we should be observing the whole of our lives. And I don't want to hear the excuse about light pollution. Light pollution impacts how many stars and if you see the Milky Way. But remember, my thick Coke bottle glasses, and remember, it's Coke bottle. Do we remember that, troll? Oh, Nancy. Nancy said I had Coke bottles. Coke, not Coke, but they're Coke bottles. I am literally blind in one of my eyes. I see nothing out of it. And yet, living in Koreatown, near downtown LA, right? Not far at all. Hop, skip, and a jump. I know people in LA be like, it's so far. It's not far. I could see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn with my naked eye. Light pollution at all. And if you can see those, you can freaking see the moon when it's visible. It's not always visible in the same place at the same time every day or every night. It rises in the east and it sets in the west. And if you want to know more, you can head over to my TikTok and watch the video I did about it. Oh my God, it gave me a headache. And I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep. Because this is like basic freaking knowledge. So I don't often talk about my personal life on here, but this is reminding me of the time that I got kind of pushed over the edge to end up homeschooling my kids. Because when my daughter was in 2nd grade, she was in a 5th grade reading class. Brilliant child. And I had a standing order that if she needed to call me, she could call me. She needed to insist, if there was, when she had asthma and she was asymptomatic, she didn't necessarily wheeze. And so if they weren't letting her get her inhaler, to give me a call. because I would sort things out because we'd had problems about that. But also if there was a problem with the teacher. And so I get this phone call and this teacher is like, I need to talk to you about your daughter. And I was like, oh, okay. What's going on? Now, here's something you need to know about my child. She would reserve the arguments for her mother, but I knew full well she would not argue with authority figures in the same way because I had observed from the distance on more than one occasion. She might roll her eyes, but she wouldn't clap back, not at 7. Okay. And I said, oh, it's unusual for Sarah to be argumentative. What happened? Because I also knew from parenting my child that the only time she argued was if she felt she was correct. If she knew she was wrong, she'd be like, I'll go to my room. I'm like, no, that is not a punishment. You like being there. Right? But she'd give herself consequences. She's a double Virgo. She likes the rules. So she didn't like breaking rules. So if she was arguing with somebody, there was probably a reason. So instead of jumping to her defense, I gave the teacher a chance. I was like, oh, what was the problem? Well, she insists that whales are mammals. This is a 5th grade teacher. And I got quiet. And I said, that would be because they are mammals. And she said, no, they're fish. And I was like, madam, are you being facetious? I don't know what you mean. You're teaching 5th grade reading. Facetious means, are you joking? No, whales are fish. I said, do you have a master's degree? Yes. Did you get it from a Cracker Jack box? That's where I went with it, guys. And I was like, ma'am, there is a golden book in the library that will explain to you why whales are mammals. Now, why would my daughter know that at 7 when it was common freaking knowledge and she was a double Virgo and loved animals? But also we lived and where her stepdad worked, which was in a state park with lots of naturalists, biologists, marine biologists, geologists, always coming in and out of the park, always having community education. So she had a little advantage there. But what got me was somebody had got to a master's degree level living in the Pacific Northwest, the Puget Sound even, because I was like, were you raised in this area? Puget Sound has resident orcas, which are whales or a form of dolphin, actually. And humpback whales go through. Like, there's whales. Okay. There's whales, there's eagles, and there's orcas. And she just, yeah. And that was when I was like, I can't trust the system if basic common knowledge is gone. And that's how I feel about people who believe somebody took the freaking moon. Come on. Nobody's going to take the freaking moon? Why? Why would you even believe that? And it's kind of like going hand in hand with some of these stupid conspiracy theories about the government controlling the weather. Stop listening now if you believe that. I did a video on TikTok on Sunday explaining why people believe in conspiracy theories. And one of the reasons is because it feels safer to believe in something that fantastical than the actual truth, which can be terrifying. It can be really hard to look at things with just bold-faced truth. Climate scientists have been warning since I was a child, so back in the 70s, that what we're experiencing today would be the beginning of a turning point when it came to climate change. And I've been warning about this for quite a few years now, especially once I joined TikTok, which was 4 years ago on the 6th. and trying to get people ready for it. And there is nowhere that will not be impacted by it in some way, shape, or form. If you're a patron, then you know in the headlines chat, I've put up tons of articles regarding climate change. The Sahara has greenery right now from the amount of water. The Sahara Desert, okay, the thing in Africa that's very barren is not barren, okay. There's been massive flooding in Asia. I don't know about you, but I cried my eyes out watching them try to rescue those elephants in Thailand. I love elephants. They're also mammals. China's getting hit by rain. The Himalayas are getting hit by rain. India is getting hit by rain. Indian Ocean's getting hit by rain. Central Africa, South Africa got snow. Come on. It's climate change. And no, Dr. Evil is not sitting there with a switch, and you might even think it's Elon Musk or Marjorie Taylor Greene declared it was the Democrats. And we know what a genius she is. That was sarcasm. It's easier to believe somebody's controlling the weather because if somebody's controlling it, somebody can stop doing what they're doing. It gives you an illusion that something somehow will go back to normal. It's not going to. It's not going back to normal. We are going to see things change, irrevocably change, meaning it's not going to change back. You're not going to get your normal back. I've been trying to say this in so many nice ways for so long. And there's just no being nice about it anymore because people believe somebody stole the freaking moon. When we get to that level of dumb, I take the gloves off and I'm going to let you know. When I say massive systemic change, I mean that normal is gone. Normal is gone. Nobody is coming to take your stuff. Nobody is coming to try to control you. Nobody knows who you actually are when it comes to government. They don't care about that. And when it comes to emergency management plans, if you've been involved or know people who've been involved in them, they know they're not going to be able to rescue or recover everybody, depending on the natural disaster. They know it's a bigger problem than a small or even sizable group of people can manage fast enough. And I'll never forget when they were reworking the emergency management plan in the county where I lived in Washington State. And my then husband and a friend who worked for the county came out of the meeting and they were gray-green. They were sick to their stomachs because some of the natural disaster scenarios that could occur had such a vast amount of casualties. And it was impossible, should the emergency management staff not be part of those casualties, because that was a big possibility too, to be able to save as many people as they would want to save. As the daughter of somebody who was EMS, as the former wife of someone who is law enforcement and EMS, there's only so much people can do. That is why I hammer home being as reliant as you can be and being as aware of things as you can be. And not believing that somebody took the freaking moon. Come on, kids know better than that. That's just... And Dr. Evil isn't controlling the weather. It's not punishment for voting a certain way. The Gulf states and the Southeast Coast has been warned. The Northwest has been warned. California has been warned. The Northeast has been warned. Midwest has been warned by climate scientists about conditions. Mountain states, they've been warned. You can look up the science, and some of the science is written in layman's terms. Not all of it's in sciencey talk. Okay. We have got to do better, guys. My blood pressure can't take this. I can't. Stealing the moon. Come on. God. What a ride the last 4 years has been, and I'm just going to hit my end with the dumbassery. It's just... Oh my God. And get ready for more, because shit's about to hit the fan, guys, in a big way as we head towards that Pluto stationing direct. It's from the 11th through the end of the month, things just get more and more effed up. More and more effed up. It's just going to be one thing after the other. Yeah. So... Why don't we do some patron shout-outs now that I've been super cheery and made us all feel like dumbasses. The moon did not disappear. Lord have mercy. Anyway, let's do some patron shout-outs, because a whole bunch of new people joined. So... lots of new members, lots of new faces, and make sure if you're a new patron that you click through the app on your phone. If you've got the Patreon app on your phone, it's a free app through the App Store, because there's collections, and those have different things like the patron-only podcast, the Q&A library, patron resources, which includes walkthrough videos on how to use the app, how to change the settings so you're not inundated with notifications, how to access the community chat, all that fun stuff. And you can do it on the web browser, and you can do it on your phone. Okay, so make sure you're accessing those things. It's a great group, but man, we're really growing. Thank you for supporting the podcast. So let's do some patron shout outs. And then we'll talk about Pluto stationing direct, just to make you feel even better. Just remember, I only laugh when things get serious. Oh my gosh, it's always a privilege to have to break up the patron shout-outs. It's super exciting. We've got Lauren, Mariella, Jay, Dar, Catherine, Destiny, Blair, Sarah, Granny Shanny, Janie, Tara, Jan, Francesca, Bookslut, Caroline, Bovary, Maria, Amor, Brooke, Kim, Islas, Barbara, Dana, Jessica, Jen, Ms. HLP, Laura, Mandy, Brenda, Cindy, Taya, Daughter of Mars 222, Amber, Alex, Heather, Amber, Misbehaving, ER, Jennifer, Aisling, Sky, Meredith, Abby, Lorianne, Mindy, Carla, Nikki, Aaron, EG, Neka, Amanda, Shauna, Aaron, Kathleen, Carolyn, Trista, Laura, Andrea, Jenny, Ashley, Cheryl, Megan, Emmanuel, Diana, Laura L, Peach Blossom, Jillian, Mariah, Lisa B, Samantha, Tina, Kimberly, Patrina, Laurie, Soledad, Adriana, EI, Robin, and Kristen. Big shout outs to you guys. Thank you for being patrons and sponsoring this podcast. Without you, this podcast doesn't exist. Remember, if you're listening on Spotify, you can thank a patron in the comments. All right. Let's see what's going to happen. What's going to explode this week? Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like Darth Vader's walking into the room. R.I.P. James Earl Jones. You were a great Darth Vader. Scared the crap out of me when I was 8 and saw the movie the first time it came out. That's how old I am. Oh, I feel a lot like Grover in There's a Monster at the end of this book. Don't turn the page. There's a monster at the end of this book. It's a classic. Oh, guys. Okay, so this week is going to be a lot. We have Hurricane Milton. Like, who names a Hurricane Milton? Although, funniest TikTok I saw was putting up Milton from Office Space, which is a classic film, with the red stapler, saying, "We didn't take your stapler, Milton." And I watch few movies, but that is literally one of my favorite films, to the point where my children bought me a red stapler for Christmas one year. But anyway, I want my stapler back. Oh, guys, it's a week. Okay, it's just a week. And if you really want to be uplifted and have some hope, go back and revisit the end of last week's podcast. Okay. And there is hope, but the Jenga tower's about to start falling with Pluto stationing direct. And that happens in the evening of October 11th. So on the 12th, we'll wake up to some bombshell headlines, which is unusual because it's a Saturday. This whole week is intense. Okay. It just is. And I try to be really uplifting. I try not to scare the crap out of people. I try to give you hope. And yet I'm going to just say this. At this point, we are all tired. We are all past done. We are cooked. We are so done with historic events, and yet we are not done. There are so many more to come. And as much as October 2024 is literally like the definition of the very most intense month of the year, even though November 1st and 2nd are also doozies. I'm not going to lie. And November is an intense month, but just not to the same scale as October. Okay. 2025 is intense. 2026 is intense. The intensity ain't going away. It's not. And so we have to really learn how to build ourselves up and build up our inner locus of control. And that is why I keep writing those long essays called The Work in the Awake Space Astrology magazine, because everybody talks about doing the work, but they never tell you what the work actually is. So I've written about shadow work. I've written about understanding cognitive dissonance and training your Mercury. I've written about resistance patterns and how to identify them and release them. In this issue, we talked about power and owning your personal power. We could reclaim it. Most people didn't start out with it because we've all been trained to hand our power over, right? And this article series is long and it has exercises. So it's not just like, oh, read this intellectual romp. No, I've tried to put it in as plain English as I can with helpful exercises so that you can work through it. Okay. So patrons that get the magazine, go read through it. Okay, because I'm not writing these just to espouse my beliefs and indoctrinate people. I'm trying to give you a framework with which you can work so that you can make a difference in your own life, let alone anybody else's. Okay. But there was another article I wrote, and this is one I want to talk a little bit about, and that's about doing protection work energy-wise. Okay. Since I was accused of working with demons, I'm not going to say demons don't exist. Everything has the potential to exist. I just think people often use the esoteric and the metaphysical as an excuse. And so we're going to go over here. We're going to take a look at the article I wrote about protection. And because I think this week, everybody could use a little bit of protection. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. But this is one of the articles. I read a mystery school related article. Let's put it this way: The Mechanics of Metaphysics series, practical guide to integrating the spiritual and physical worlds. And so I have little 2-page articles every month. And this one is called Protection. So we're just going to talk about what protection is, why we need it, and some of the principles. And if you want to know more, you can find it in the Patreon. One of the reasons I don't talk much about the darker side of metaphysics isn't that it doesn't exist. Everything exists. Every thought that has ever been thought exists. Everything that anyone has ever believed exists on some realm or distant reality. And yet, the more we talk about it, the more we think about it, the more belief we put into it, the more we empower it. Think about the evangelicals and how they keep obsessing over dark energy and the opposition, or Satan, if you will. What are they doing by obsessing? Invoking the very energy which they fear. Notice the hate-filled rhetoric that drives them. It's not the good news. It's not peace, and it's most definitely not love. It's why so many have left the church in the past 2 decades. And yet, as one deconstructs away from the misuse of belief to inspire fear and terror, very few people find adequate resources to build trust, faith, and hope in something real for themselves. That's where the spirituality movements often fail. Because unless you dive deep into the arcane or are lucky to stumble upon teachers like Abraham Hicks or Bashar or myself or Medium Matilda, you are often left with rehashed theology that does not do much to inspire faith, hope, and love other than focus on positive vibes only, which of course is a form of resistance and can backfire, leaving you wondering what you did wrong. For more information on resistance, see the September 2024 issue of the Awake Space magazine. So it boils down to this. Our mind is our most powerful tool because it is the thoughts we think and the beliefs we hold that are the root of our receptivity to energy, whether it's productive and helpful or obstructive and hurtful. In the words of Abraham Hicks, thoughts become things. So when it comes to protection, our thoughts are the first we need to protect. Not that we manifest every bad thing that happens in our shared reality. No, we do not. However, fear breeds fear. Worry breeds worry. Doubt breeds doubt, and the opposite is true too. Listen to any survivor of any tragic event, and they will tell you of the moment when they surrendered, where they found peace and had hope. It's a common experience amongst those who manage to make it through circumstances beyond their control. When the world is scary, and it can be, what then? What do we do when it seems that our foundations are falling right out from under our feet, when things don't seem like they'll ever be okay? What then? And that's where I introduce the 3 Ps, where we pause, find purpose, and prepare. Because a lot of times, and that's where I'm going to leave you on the article, if you want the rest of it where I go through the pause, the purpose, and the prepare, you can go read the article. But I'll talk about it now. Before we get to Pluto, because I want you guys to be ready for this. Because Pluto is actually about power and how power operates. Okay. And most of us have only experienced power as a form of dominance and control, not an immensely intimate understanding of self. And that's the ultimate power, knowing yourself. When I think about power, I think about Nelson Mandela, and he was incarcerated for 27 years and in solitary a great amount of that time, which can really take you completely away. And he started out a very, very angry human being. And he did a lot of violent things. That's part of why he ended up there. He was a resistance fighter. Okay. And he came to great peace because there was nothing he could do to change his situation. I mean, can you imagine being incarcerated for 27 years? You know, when all you wanted was equality for your people. Man, it'd be a big deal. And yet he turned inward and self-actualized under horrendous conditions. Conditions are not what shape us. We shape us and we meet conditions. And power isn't about strength. It's not. I mean, we tend to view it that way. Who can hit the hardest, right? That's power. Look at that power. But if we look at power of, it's what animates us. It's what we plug into to spark things and make them work, knowing our power. And that's why it's so important to guard your thoughts. And when I say guard your thoughts, I'm saying that if you feel like you need protection, is it coming from a place of fear? I fear that thing I do not understand, and I am going to create a bubble to push it away. But if you're focused on what you're afraid of, that bubble isn't going to shield you. Okay. In fact, if anything, you could trap your fear inside the bubble and make yourself real paranoid. It's a hazard. And so you want to take a pause. And this week, I suggest everyone, before you type out an email, before you text back, before you make a snarky comment in response to something, Laurie, pay attention. Pause. Take a breath. Exhale. May not want to do it in front of somebody. Might want to have to hey, I have to go to the bathroom. But pause. Don't react. Don't make a decision. Just pause. Okay. The only time we have to make an imminent decision in the moment is when there's actual real danger. Yeah. There's a wall of water coming from you. It's not time to take a pause and go, oh, what should I do? It is run like hell, right? Get to safety. That's when we let the adrenaline pump and the cortisol roll, because that's designed to keep us safe. But if it's a difference of opinion, if it's a business matter, if it's a relationship matter, take a pause. Take a pause. If it's not actual danger, take a pause. And then get clear. What do you need to, what is it for? If you're protecting yourself, what is it for? I want to feel at ease. So the purpose is to be more at ease. Okay. The purpose is to be more energized, to retain my energy. The purpose would be to have better boundaries. Notice how you're putting it to you and how it builds you up instead of, I want to keep that so-and-so away. You know, I want to make sure if they hit me, I hit them back with a return to sender. Right? We can, and it can be effective. I'm not saying those things aren't real and that they don't work. They can. But it's also expending your energy. And where does your energy actually need to go? Like if you need to be functional and stay focused on what is going to enliven you and help you thrive, where are you going to put your focus? So you can, part of understanding the purpose is it helps, this is going to help me thrive. That's a big one. So I kind of have like a standing order with the universe that if people push back against me or try to hurt me, it makes me grow. It just makes me stronger. It transmutes and it just makes me stronger. I will benefit by their ill intent. That's a good one. I don't wish anybody anything. Like, I'm not trying to get back at them. I'm not trying to, you know. Now, occasionally, if I'm feeling petty and I'm not at my highest consciousness level, if somebody's tossing shit my way, I will occasionally let it bounce back. Be like, oh, you tried to bite me. Well, may that mirror back. It's not the best use of the energy, though. And I know that. But we're human, and I also am a Scorpio rising, and occasionally I feel petty that way. Right? But in general, especially in serious times like these, I do not have the energy to toss back every piece of negative energy that comes my direction, whether it's intentional negativity or unintentional negativity, whether it's from the collective or, collective unconscious, or whether it's a direct somebody doesn't like me for whatever reason. I don't have time. I have to hold my energy steady. There are now almost 2,000 people who are supporting patrons. So that means they pay, and they pledge money to the Patreon. And my focus is on supporting them. So I can't afford to be spending my energy all over the place. Right? You have a family. You have fur babies. You have relationships. You have friends. You have colleagues. You have a community. Where do you need to put your focus? Is it on, tossing spells at people and going, I'm going to protect myself with this? So no, first of all, you want to know the purpose. You're going to pause so you're not freaking out. And then you want to know the purpose. What is the purpose of the protective item? Preserving my sanity, preserving my well-being, preserving my energy, preserving my focus so I could be of service. Those are all really, really strong purposes. I mean, but equally, you could be like, the purpose of this is to really piss them off. The purpose of this is to make them wish they'd never fucked with me again. Those are also purposes. But they're going to expend a little more focus, a little more energy outside of yourself, and it's actually giving the other person more power than necessary. Okay. And then you want to prepare. You prepare the protection. You prepare yourself, you prepare whatever components. And in the second part of the article, I give you a list of all the different ways you can protect yourself, whether it's through energy work, component magic, charms, which can include jewelry. Okay. And why am I bringing this up? Because the freaking collective unconscious is whipped up. The astral plane is whipped up. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety. You might be picking up on it. And if you're super sensitive, like I am, then it's easy to pick up on it. Like, I'm physically very sensitive, so it can disrupt my sleep. It can, including in my sleep. I laughed because I had an incident the other night. No, I don't want to describe it, but I woke up and then there was no sleep. And then I found out about them stealing the moon. And I was dumb. I was like, well, now I'm fully distracted. But that hurt me, right? So guess who's going to be setting her protections, which is just keeping my space clear so I can stay focused and so my physical self doesn't get run down. Super simple. Super simple. And knowing we're protected is important. And I was really lucky with that. Now, again, I talked about this a little bit earlier. I was a well-church child because my great-grandma took me to church every single weekend from the time I was a baby. And I had her in my life until I was 11 years old. Her passing was my Pluto conjunct my moon transit at 11. And it taught me a lot about life, death, love, and the afterlife, because she wasn't gone very long when I felt her sitting next to me on my bed. And I knew she'd be with me. And yes, I still tear up 44 years later because she was my rock. Although I'm pretty sure it's good she passed when she did, because by the time I got to my teens and I was a little squirrely, she and I probably would have not seen eye to eye. And that would have been hurtful. But when I was a little girl, like teeny tiny, she would tell me how I was protected, how she had prayed over me as an infant, because I had an 80% chance of dying. Those of you who've been listeners for a long time probably remember the story. But we have so many new listeners. So I was born with something called pyloric stenosis. My mother ran pillar to post, doctor to doctor, trying to get me diagnosed as a brand new infant. I was her first child. This was 1969. And no doctor was listening to my mother because they felt she was a nervous new mother, because tut tut, you little lady. And yet I was projectile vomiting, and I was losing weight rapidly. I went from a healthy 7-pound baby to dropping to 5 pounds in the first 8 days of my life. And finally, mom and dad found a doctor who would listen, and he said, we have to operate. And I was 11 days old when they operated. And the doctor told my mother, prepare for your child to die. She has an 80% chance of dying. And they wouldn't even let my mom sit with me after the operation. Like they had me in a nursery with tubes, and they wouldn't let me be with my mom. And that caused its own series of stuff. But they could sit outside the nursery and wait. And my great grandmother was out there, and she told me from the time I can remember, just from the time I was tiny, I prayed for you. I prayed for your protection. I prayed that you would live. I prayed that you would not only live, but you would thrive and you would prosper, and that should anyone come against you, it would go against them 3 times as hard. I mean, you remember that. That's what I was raised with. There's a star in heaven with your name on it, Laurie. She was a little witchy, even though she went to church. Every time I follow this creator called Grammy Druid, and I think she should have a much bigger following. She's an archdruid, and amazing elder teacher. And when she talks about Appalachian folk magic, it reminds me of the stuff my great grandma did. I was like, if you would have told her that was magic, I don't know that she would have agreed. Just how things were done, Or maybe she would have just dismissed it. Prayer is a form of magic. It's focused thought. And it's powerful. It's powerful. I know I go at theology a lot, but I can tell you every belief system has an element of truth to it. Every belief has an element of truth. And I know that focused thought is a powerful thing, and that is exactly what prayer is. Never think that prayer isn't magic, because it's evocative. It's invocative. Sorry, I can talk. It's invocative magic. You can invoke. And years later, at the tender age of 22 or 23, well, no, 22, because I was newly married, and to my college sweetheart living in Bahrain, and my then mother-in-law looked at me and said, I prayed for you to die. I burned a candle at both ends and prayed to baby Jesus that you and Saddam Hussein would die in a fire. It is so cool to be equated with a really bad guy. And the minute she said she prayed to baby Jesus, I was like, oh, wow, that might be a problem. I should have warned you. This is all my fault. And yes, I was being an asshole, but it was all my fault. I should have told you. I'm sorry. I should have warned you, but I was born very, very sick, and my great grandmother prayed over me and prayed protection on me that will last me my whole life. And she prayed to baby Jesus, and so your prayer isn't going to work. And the look of fear on her face, because she was a traditional practitioner from the country she was from, of like, oh shit. Now, she and I ended up getting along after I had the grandkids. She was supportive of me, even leaving her son. Okay. She stayed in contact till the day she died. But the day she died, I gave a cheeky grin to the sky and said, who's dead now, bitch? She was a Scorpio. She would have found it funny. Okay. I'm making light and I'm telling these stories because the most important thing in my life, no matter how hard it got, and it got hard, the belief in the indoctrination of what I got as a child, that you are protected, you are loved, you are protected, was the thing that got me through. Now, you may not have been so lucky to have had that at your foundation. That was my great grandma. Losing her during the Pluto conjunct my moon time period, it taught me a lot. Yeah, I felt her sitting next to me, but it still left me bereft and alone and isolated because my mom was going through her thing. And that was a hard year. And there's no blame on my mom for it. It's just what was. We can blame people all we want, but it's just what was. She was a human being going through her experience and transits, and I was going through mine. With not a lot of tools. So, but knowing that I was always protected somehow, and it always worked out. Always was. That's the power of the mind. You can train yourself. Because I can guarantee you, it wasn't just because my grandma prayed. We are all surrounded by so much more support than you can imagine. But we have to tune into the frequency. Okay. And if we're thinking about revenge, if we're thinking about bitterness, if we're thinking about shame, blame, guilt, worry, fear, doubt, rage, it's hard to tune into the immense amount of support that we have surrounding us. And that support from the other side through guidance, through, angels or guardian angels or our soul or the quantum, however you want to imagine it. That doesn't mean bad things don't happen. And it doesn't mean we don't die. Death isn't a punishment. It just is. It's part of life. I talked about that last week too. But being able to tune in to that knowing that we are loved and we are encouraged. Always. Your guides are never mad at you. They're never mad at you. They're just going to reach you in a way you can perceive it. So like, I can be a snarky asshole. So guess what? My guides sent me messages that were snarky and asshole-ish until I shifted. And they just became signs I can recognize, a feeling I can recognize. It's almost kind of boring at this point. I'm like, damn, I need to go back to just being like, hey, hit me over the head. I want some phenomenon again. Now it's just part of my day-to-day. Because we grow in our awareness, right? Right? Okay. Know that you have that encouragement. However you phrase it or believe. Okay. I'm not telling you how to believe. I'm not even telling you what to believe. I'm telling you what I know from my perspective. And then you can plug and play that into your own belief system. Okay. And no, not everybody does get lucky to have a great grandma who thinks they are the perfect princess. But if I hadn't had that grandma, I wouldn't be doing what I do today. Because I wouldn't have made it. They are the reason I was resilient. So we can all thank her. We can all thank Lydia Matilda Horner, my great grandma. Her middle name really was Matilda. Aww. That's how I knew Matilda and I should be friends. I was like, that is my great grandma's middle name. All right. So let's talk about this week. Now that I have you prepared, okay, and you can always tune in to the podcast. You can always listen to it again to get reassurance, to hear something that inspired you or soothed you, to help you go to sleep. I know a lot of you listen to me late at night so you can go to sleep, and I take that as the greatest compliment. Let's talk about what's going to happen this week, and then I promise not to leave you in the drama. I promise I'll end it on a higher note. Okay. So let's take a look at what's happening this week. I'll run you through, since the magazine is out, the predictions are up, they're out. I'll give you some of the highlights. I'm not going to read through everything just because this is already a long episode. All right. October 6th through the 9th, the moon is in Sagittarius. The tea is spilling hot. Lies are exposed and agreements and alliances fail. We could see forest fires, bushfires, lightning strikes, arsons. Fires go out of control because of wind, tropical storms, hurricanes, typhoons, and issues with warm seas. Tensions erupt in the Straits of Taiwan or territorial waters of the Philippines. That could be actual war, but it could also be typhoons. Issues with Iran could be leadership and or actions taken with drones and missiles. Let's see, what else? We could see political violence, nationalism, right-wing and left-wing clash. That could be global. Riots, protests, and mass violence. Donald Trump's going to get some bad news or has a health issue. We could see an issue with the Pope or other religious leader as well. We could see scandals with religious leaders, and we could see a big international incident involving either people from many countries or it involves a border crossing. All international disputes increase, truces and ceasefires fail, war breaks out in regions with tension. We could see a sizable earthquake of a 6.0 or higher in the Pacific Rim, and other regions could see up to a 5.8. We could see a massive storm or issues to do with a massive storm. Could be a hurricane or something that starts at sea and goes through more than one country. I've had that in the Sagittarius forecast, Sagittarius moon time for a while. October 9th through the 11th. So starts on the 9th, ends on the 11th. The moon will be in Capricorn. This is historic events. We will see historic events, especially late on the 11th, early on the 12th, maybe even on the 10th. So could be mass casualties from a natural event, terrorist attack in a metro area. This could be global. It could be acts of war, death of leaders or a leader. It could be prominent figures as well going down. More than one event globally. So there's more than one thing happening. We could see a big water event. It could involve massive loss of life and infrastructure damage. Failed governments in countries with coalition governments. UK government under pressure and an issue with the royal family could be King Charles or Princess Anne. Donald Trump gets bad news. Biden could have a health crisis that is undeniable. Kamala Harris under stress or forced to change a policy position, and Harris's safety is in question or her family's safety. We could see erosion causing storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, changing temperatures, thaws, freezes, or even snow in lower elevations depending on location, bombing or terrorist attack or an explosion of some kind. Remember, this is global. We could see a celebrity scandal or breakup. And we could see a leader deposed or a coup d'etat or maybe a world leader dies. NATO is in crisis. Seismic activity increased up to a 6.5 or volcanic action offshore. And then from the 11th through the 13th. Now, this is the thing. On the 11th, before Pluto stations direct, the moon in Capricorn is conjunct Pluto. And this is just huge. And then the moon will move into Aquarius, and then Pluto will station direct later in the evening, like after 8 p.m. Pacific, I believe. Maybe after 5. I'm not looking at my charts right now. So here's the deal. Between October 11th through the 13th, the Israeli government is going to be under a pressure attack of the actual parliament. Like, it could face a physical attack, or the leadership could get attacked. So these are physical attacks on the Israeli government. Explosions, launch failures, satellite failures, lights in the sky, and meteorites. We could see big windstorms globally, issues with ocean currents, temperatures, and turbulence. Could see tragic air accident, plane shut down, or a helicopter crash. Icebergs, melting glaciers, and sea ice are in the headlines. Issues with fertilizer, farm technology, and land security concerns increased in all major cities, especially the 11th and the 12th. Unseasonable temperatures and or extreme temps, either freezing or extreme heat, depending on where in the world you are. The EU and or NATO has a crisis. Let's see. There could be issues with banking and crypto. We could see another solar storm. Okay. We could see big protests in Germany, France, and the UK, potentially, or it could also be big weather. We could see power plant, chemical plant accidents, and explosions in a big way. I wouldn't be surprised if some of that's oil refineries in the Middle East. Keep your eye on Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, and Syria. So those are all areas I'm looking at this week. So that is a bunch of what's going on. That's what's in the headlines. In the United States, we could actually see a terrorist attack at the end of the week on the Friday or the Saturday. It could be at a protest. It could be political. It could be related to anything to do with FEMA, because of the conspiracy theories around it. You know, FEMA is an organizing agency. So it organizes resources. It organizes help. It enlists volunteers, and they hire local people on the ground. It's not there to get in people's way or take people's stuff. The government doesn't need FEMA to take your property. You have to remember there's a massive amounts of contaminants. That is one of the things I don't think gets emphasized enough. When you have a major flood, the ground becomes contaminated from chemicals, feces, other waste. And so if you're asked not to be somewhere, there can be reasons for that. Do we need overhauls with how we do the disaster management? Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes years for recovery to happen. And I think because people watch so much television and they see problems resolved in 45 minutes, they expect things to be resolved a lot faster than humanly possible, even with a great deal of resources. So there's a lot going on in the world. And I think we'll just see the escalation of conflict. I think we will see issues between Israel and Iran expand. I think it will be almost impossible for diplomacy to work right now at all. People can blame Harris all they want. As VP, you do not have that executive power or privilege to make those decisions. You have to carry out the president's position. That is your job. Okay. But we may see Biden having to take a step back after this week. We'll see. It could be a health crisis. That's very obvious, or he may be asked to step down. Behind the scenes, we may never know. But this might be where I saw Kamala inheriting the presidency. If it doesn't happen next week, it will happen before his term ends. And it will happen because policy has to change as far as negotiations go. Because our national security is at stake. So we will see what happens with that. And if you want to know more about why I think that, you need to go over and watch the Kamala Harris presentation I did. Is 44 minutes long. All patrons get it at the $5 level and up. if you're having trouble with it loading or if it stops playing, you need to refresh your browser or refresh the app. So somebody complained about that in the comments, and it's funny because they deleted their comment and quit in a huff, and because I was like, did you refresh the app? And they're like, they I think they felt I was being mean or something. I don't know how to answer that other than, did you refresh? You know, to do those things first. Make sure it's plugged in. I use Patreon so I don't have to do all the maintenance. So if you're having technical difficulties, it's better to ask Patreon support for help, because I can't fix any technical matters on Patreon. It's not my code. And thank God I do enough. I want to fix code too. So if you're having problems with the app or anything going on, things aren't loading or having a hard time downloading something, get a hold of the Patreon support. You can find that in your settings. If you can find that. Okay. Patreon support it's available through both the browser and the app, and you can ask for help. They're very helpful, and they want to make sure things are working. So they're not going to be upset with you for bringing up a problem. They're going to thank you for it. I know, I work with these people really closely. So Pluto stationing direct is just a lot of energy. And the fact that the moon is going to be conjuncted, I think we're going to see massive infrastructure damage, massive failure. These could be the results of hurricanes. We're not done after Milton. There's more. This is just getting started. The Southeast is going to hit, and I've been saying that for how long? When people talked about, the election's canceled. Election's not canceled, but voting may be delayed or extended. And that is because if you can't get to a polling place because it was destroyed, how do people make their votes count? Okay. So there may be an emergency extension for places where there was a tremendous amount of damage. And I still think more is going to hit into Louisiana and Alabama. That may not be Milton, but it could be another storm coming in. There are models that show the potential for more storms coming in after the 16th. And we're looking at a full moon on the 17th. That is such a heavy hitting full moon. It is 2020 level WTF level energy. And like I said, we may not know about Biden's health after the Pluto turns direct, but we'll probably know something after that full moon. And I wrote about this in the magazine because it impacts Kamala Harris, and I talked about it in the presentation for you guys in Patreon. So there's a lot. We are in for some very turbulent times. And yet, you have the power to navigate this in this time of uncertainty and put one foot in front of the other. You do. So much more than you know, even when you're tired. And it's okay to be tired, and it's okay to not want to put one foot in front of the other sometimes. Sometimes we just need to sit and rest and recalibrate and watch the sunrise. Through some of the hardest times of my life, I learned that observing nature was the best thing I could do. Looking for the different colors of green available to me. Just like, how many colors of green can I find? Looking at the clouds, looking at their shapes. We used to call it cloud busting back in the 80s, looking for the elephants and the dragons and the hummingbirds and the dolphin shapes. And if you stare at them long enough, it's almost like the clouds are trying to delight you by coming up with new shapes, Looking for the butterflies, looking for the hope or the silver lining. That's how you get through times. giving yourself a small pleasure, a guilty pleasure, reading a dime store novel or, a good old fashioned bodice ripper, watching a cheesy TV show, playing a game, talking to a friend, checking on a neighbor, baking cookies, maybe brownies. This week it might be double fudge brownies. I've been looking at a flourless brownie recipe. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It may result to that. But we get through how we get through. And this change is necessary. I don't think all of the destruction is necessary. I don't think we need trauma to help us grow as people. I think a lot of times trauma gets in our way, personal experience, because it's just more energy we have to put into healing, which does produce its own kind of wisdom. And it doesn't get us in the weeds forever, right? But it's nice to be on a more solid ground. But remember, it's not a moral failure if you're facing difficult things this week. You're growing. You're evolving. And it's a chance for you to practice being in your authentic and aligned power. And remember, as a patron, you can always come into the chats. We're there for you. We have a venting chamber, so you can scream into the void if you need to. And then come into the awakenings and we can talk metaphysics or smack talk about people and current events and bash Elon and other things. That's something we have to look forward to, though. After the 11th, Elon is maybe going to find himself in some hot water, which a little schadenfreude feels good sometimes, right? But anyway, I want to thank you for listening. We've been hitting records in our listenership every single week. It's absolutely delightful. Thank you for being a patron. If you're a patron and supporting the podcast, without you, there is no podcast. But even if you're not a supporting patron and you're there supporting with vibes at the free membership level, thank you. It means the world to me. People who want to hear what I have to say, people who are willing to listen and find inspiration, even if you don't agree with everything I say, but it might spark a thought and maybe get your own ideas going. I'm totally honored to be a catalyst for you. So remember, we got to hold hands and look both ways when we cross the street, and we need to share, and cookies and cold milk are good for you. Have a good week.